Well, hi, and thanks for stopping by the Pellets and Pistons Airgun channel. Another gorgeous day here in New England, and we're out here with the Diana Model 460 Magnum. This is my friend's rifle. Some of you who follow the channel may remember this one was up in a recent video where we took it apart and discovered one of the reasons the gun wasn't shooting up to snuff. And that was because of a bunch of lead that had been jammed up into the forward end of the receiver, and that was caused by the previous user. This was bought as a refurb, I should mention that. So the previous user, whoever refurbed it, didn't do a very good job because they didn't discover this, I did. But the previous shooter had mashed those pellets in there. Every time he'd drop a pellet, he'd simply close the rifle, and that pellet would get pushed forward by the cylinder. And each time it would just add a little more lead, add a little more lead, and pretty soon he had several pellets worth of lead up in the forward end of the receiver, and the gun wouldn't close all the way. You would think it was closed, but it wasn't closed all the way, and therefore the breech seal wasn't sealing, and the gun was very inconsistent and wasn't shooting up to snuff. So that's what we discovered. We replaced the piston seal, we replaced the breech seal, and while we were in there, we were going to replace the mainspring with a replacement mainspring that my friend had bought from a reputable company. They advertised that spring as the one that belongs in this rifle and a few other models. So he brought the wrong spring. So we took a look at what he brought. It was a used spring. It was all kind of kinked up and it didn't look good. So we decided not to use that spring, and we put the original back in the gun. But now with the new seals and the lead out of the way that was all jammed up in the receiver, the gun ended up producing over 20 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, and with an extreme spread of around 10 feet per second. So that was pretty impressive. And we were, relatively pleased with that. But Brian had this nagging feeling like he meant to put the new spring in the gun and he didn't do it. So he went home and he found the spring, and we made a date to come back and try it again. So we're going to put the gun on the bench today. We're going to replace that original spring with the newer spring. Now the newer spring is an inch longer, and the coil diameter, or the wire diameter I should say, is a few thousandths bigger than the spring that's in the rifle now. It's going to make a difference. It's certainly going to make a difference. But I think that the difference will surprise you. So stick around, it's ought to be fun, and thanks again for stopping by the Pellets and Pistons Airgun channel. So before we begin, we have to remove the scope from the rifle. This one proved to be on a little bit too tight. Once the scope is off, we can go to work removing the stock. Now, without wasting any time, we'll drive out the two pins at the rear of the receiver. The first pin comes out with no worries. However, the second pin, when it's removed from the gun, if there's nothing restraining the action, it's going to fly apart. So you need to make sure that you keep the pin in the hole until you're ready to restrain the mainspring. With the second pin removed, all of the tension of the mainspring now is pushing up against the punch. I apply some downward pressure, then I'll remove the punch and relieve the tension from the mainspring slowly. Remove the spring in the guide. Here's our new spring. It's obviously quite a bit larger than the original. I'm going to put a little bit of heavy tar on the spring. But then I have the forethought to go ahead and take a measurement on the coil and see what the wire thickness is. I forget what the number is, but it's considerably larger than the original spring. So a heavier wire gauge as well as a longer spring will combine to make a much more powerful spring. With the spring coated with a light coat of heavy tar, we can go ahead and insert the spring and the guide back into the rifle. When I first took this gun apart and put the original spring back in, I was able to reassemble it on the bench without the use of the spring compressor. However, with this new spring, I needed the compressor, and I employed the help of my friend as well to operate the compressor while I lined everything up. Once the holes have lined up, you can go ahead and insert the pins. And with the help of a very trusting friend, a couple of taps to get it started. The second pin will go in much easier than the first. And we're all reassembled, ready for the stock. Oh, except for the pivot pin. We had to remove that pivot pin in order to get the barreled action chucked up into the spring compressor. So we'll lock it down into the stock and we'll be all set. All right, and that's it. A job well done. Okay, so the job's been completed, and as promised, I'm going to give you the results. Now, these were the results from the job that we did before without replacing that mainspring, just replacing the seals and getting that lead out of the action. Here's what it was doing before. All right, so you'll notice that the extreme spread is only 10 feet per second, which is beautiful, and that the output of the rifle was 20.6, I think. I'm going by memory. You can see it. I can't right now, but it was over 20 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. And so anyway, today we put the new spring in, and check out these numbers. You'll notice that the extreme spread is still pretty respectable, but the output of the rifle dropped by several foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So that's a lesson to you, and it's funny because when you start increasing the power of a mainspring, you will get better and better results, but it's diminishing returns, and at some point it actually starts to go backwards, which is what happened here. This rifle is oversprung, and it's not producing the power that it should be anymore. It's funny. You put a heavier spring in, you think you're going to get more power, but that's not always the way it works. So at any rate, I think my friend's going to ask me to change it back to that original spring, but for now the shot cycle is so smooth and so nice, he's decided he wants to shoot it for a while. So we're going to give it back to him, and we're going to celebrate a job well done. At least we did what we thought we were doing. We accomplished what we set out to do, which was to put a new spring in the rifle. However, the results, I think, for my friend, were a little disappointing. So at any rate, we're going to ring that bell out there at 60 yards with this Diana Model 460 Magnum. And reach out there. Oh yeah, rings it quite nicely. So I want to thank you folks for stopping by the Pellets and Pistons Airgun channel. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Hit the bell if you'd like to be reminded of future videos, and by all means, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this one. Thanks again, folks, and have a great day.